Hey everybody, Some Gadget Guy here, SomeGadgetGuy.com, and I've got a fun smartphone review for you today. I was a little late in getting my hands on an LG G2, so instead of spending a lot of time trying to do like a first impressions video and a series of other like hands-on videos, I thought I would just get straight into using this and then cut a review for you guys just so that we're in time for the holiday buying season. And so this is a proper review, son. This ain't no unboxing. We're not gonna mess around with all that noise. It's time to talk about the phone. And this is only the second LG that I've spent any appreciable amount of time with. The first being the LG Optimus G Pro, which I was very impressed with. Both of these devices are on AT&T's 4G LTE network. Both of them do a phenomenal job of handling, taking phone calls, getting onto your data, doing all those fun services on your wireless. It's really, really exciting to play with another competitor in the Android ecosystem. And I had much the same experience with the G2 that I did with the Optimus G Pro. Namely, I wasn't predisposed to liking LG handsets, and yet picking this phone up and handling it, it's a surprisingly premium, high quality experience. It's a 5.2-inch 1080p screen in the shell of a phone which is about the same size as a Galaxy S4. My Galaxy S4 Active is just a touch bigger than a standard Galaxy S4, and it's almost exactly the same size in terms of height and width as the LG G2. That's crazy how much screen they've been able to pack into this size phone. And you're instantly struck with how small the bezels are on the sides of the device. Now, much has been made about moving the volume and power button to the rear of the phone to allow them to make bezels this small. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but it is a unique experience. And I'm really excited whenever I see a manufacturer trying anything, something different with our slabs of glowing rectangle. And that's as good a place to start as any. So this is billed as being the intuitive place for where you would put controls on how we talk on our phones. I personally don't believe anything is intuitive. I don't believe there is such a thing as intuitive design, only varying degrees of familiarity. So when you first pick up this phone, it's going to be very unfamiliar because we're not used to having controls there. But handling the phone for a while, it seems to do the job just fine. I can't say there's anything inherently superior or inferior about moving the controls here. It's just kind of different. And if that's what they needed to do to make the bezels this slim and to make the device this holdable, great, more power to them. And if we want to talk nitpickies, because I like getting nitpicky, there's something funny that happens ergonomically when you position controls on the back of the phone. First of all, I just have a hard time keeping my camera clean from smudges because I'm blindly trying to feel where these different textures are. And once I hit this glass, I know I've gone too far up. But there's also something interesting which happens, like on a phone which has its power button on the side of the device, what you end up doing is pushing your thumb into that power button against the force of your other fingers. And that is a bracing action that your hand naturally does. Same thing with the volume rocker. When I go to push the volume rocker, it's pushing up against the side of my hand and against my thumb to make sure that the phone stays stable. On the G2, you have to learn a new hand-holding technique, because you have about the same amount of force necessary to push the volume rocker or push the power button to turn the device on, but you're pushing the phone away from anything else which might brace up against the phone. So you end up doing this sort of fingertip action here just to push back against the screen to make sure that you don't pop the phone out when you go to change the volume or turn it on. Again, it's not bad, it's just different, and different is unfamiliar, which means that there's a little bit of a learning curve just in how you handle the device. But one of the other artifacts of moving your controls to the back of the phone is it does something really interesting with design that I actually do kind of like. It's a hyper stark, hyper clean aesthetic. In that way that Apple used to tout, this is a screen which delivers services and content to you and it should get out of the way. Well, LG, I think, has actually found a way to improve upon that. There are no hardware controls down at the bottom of the screen. It uses on-screen controls. So you don't have any hardware distracting you from using the device down at the bottom. You have a little earpiece grill at the top, and then everything else is trying to get you to focus on this beautiful 1080p display. Again, I waffle back and forth. Is that stark or is that clean? And that's gonna become that personal preference decision that people make for themselves in what they value in how their phone looks and how it performs. And just a quick summary of the rest of the hardware on the device. There is an IR port at the top. You can use the G2 as a universal remote for your TV, stereo, cable box, DVR. That's wonderful functionality. I'm so happy to be seeing it continue in all of our Premier phones. The left side, we've got the SIM card tray. And then moving to the bottom of the phone, we have our micro USB port, speaker grills, and a headphone jack. And for as clean and as simple as the outside of the phone is, the inside of this phone is rocking some of the most hardcore gear that we could hope to put in a smartphone at the tail end of 2013. Yes, you've already heard me talk about the 1080p screen. That's pretty much normal. This is the first device that I've handled which is rocking the Qualcomm 800 series quad-core processor. And this thing is a monster. I've already produced and posted a video showing benchmarks compared to the LG Optimus G Pro, which uses the Qualcomm 600 series processor. I have just not seen hardware performance out of any device like you see out of the G2. So it's really exciting to see that series processor go into phablets like the Nokia Lumia 1520 and the Galaxy Note 3 here in the United States. But to get that performance into a slightly more phone-sized phone is extremely exciting. There are 32 gigabytes of storage on board. Of course, you're gonna lose a good chunk of that. You're gonna be in the high 20s after you fire it up for the first time, you pull it out of the box, do all the formatting, all the stuff that they've put on it. There is no expandable storage, which is gonna be a bummer for some folks out there, but I think we're just gonna have to start getting used to the fact that our phones are more and more often going to be fused shut. Now, one of the benefits of fusing this phone shut was how they layered the ultra high capacity battery cell that you find in the LG G2. There's a 3000 milliamp hour battery shoved into this form factor. So again, the LG G2 probably isn't going to be the ultra slimmest phone that you'll find, but I will happily trade fractions of an inch, millimeters of thickness to get 2-day runtime. That's right, folks. In firing this phone up for the first 48 hours that I had it, this guy ran for 47 hours, 36 of those hours on AT&T's 4G LTE, before I got a low battery warning. And it wasn't low battery, your phone's going to shut off. It was low battery, you're down to 15%. I still had room to spare at 47 hours off of a charger. You just don't trust that your phone is going to last that long. For the first week that I had the G2, I would still leave the house with my Nokia portable battery, and I've never used it with the G2. Now, I am one of those people who, regardless of how good the battery is, I'm still gonna charge it up at night, every night, so that it's fresh for the next day. But occasionally you get into those situations where, you know, you've gone the whole business day and then you're gonna go out for drinks, and you want a phone that's gonna last through that kind of usage, not be dead by dinner time. And the G2 not only makes it through that length of time, but for you folks out there who are party animals, it'll probably still be kicking when you're out walking your walk of shame the next morning and calling a friend for a lift. And even though I'm still not a huge fan of really glossy backed phones, the texture, the design texture on the G2 at least helps minimize the sort of smudginess that you might see on the back of your device. I think glossy looks really tacky when it gets dirty, when it gets fingerprint smudgy, and G2, it does better than most glossy phones in minimizing that really ugly, dirty phone look. I still wish that a company like Samsung or LG would give us a matte finished phone. I just think that the G2 in a matte finish would look really sharp, kind of like the back plastic on a Nokia device. But, you know, for those of us that still have to contend with the glossy backed phones, the slippery wet bar of soap phones, it's better. I don't love it, but at least I don't hate it. Getting into the actual experience of using the phone, I still can't say I'm a huge fan of LG's software aesthetic. I feel that sometimes menus, pop-ups, and settings feel kinda gingerbready. And going around the general software interface, we've got soft keys down at the bottom, which feels a lot like KitKat in that you can see how the wallpaper goes behind these soft keys, and there isn't a break on the notification tray at the top. I mean, that's a really clean software design for the look of the LG devices. They have their sliding panel. You can customize how this scrolls going through, and it's super, super smooth. You can sit there and do that thing that I always hate when people are like, oh, I want to scroll and see how good the scrolling performance is because the iPhone has the best scrolling performance, blah, 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 blah. I lost a little piece of my stylus there. I hope that doesn't mess me up. And pulling down on the notification tray, you can definitely see the busyness at play in LG's customization of the notification tray. I tend to disable this, but if you want, you can fire up their Q-Slide apps, and the Q-Slide apps are these handy little widget apps like here, if I pull up the phone, you can move and resize, but you get this tiny little mini dialer that you can use. And that's kind of cool. You can have like a floating little dialer and then have something else going on in the background and not lose functionality that way. And you can very quickly and easily get to these apps. And having a little calculator that's handy to get to, that's definitely a nice touch. And I definitely applaud that because this is kind of cool functionality. And then you can always, make these more or less transparent, or if you want to go full screen with them, you can always pop back to full screen, then pop back to a little widget and take this corner and make them bigger or smaller. I think that's as small as the calculator will get. And so that's cool. I like that a lot. I do think that their auto brightness is kind of broken because when you hit auto brightness, it doesn't really seem to respond to the light in your environment so much as it just dims or brightens vaguely based on where your brightness selector is. So even though it's on auto, I can still get the full gambit. And then maybe it gives you like 10% brighter or 10% darker, depending on your actual environment. I tend to leave auto off because it doesn't really seem to do what it says it's doing. And also, while it's cool having a dedicated like volume control in your notification tray, that's what the hardware buttons on the back of the phone are for, so that you can get in and control the volume of the phone. So this just feels a little unnecessary. I just don't need it in my notification tray all the time. And getting into your settings, this is kind of what I mean by, settings and menus looking a little gingerbready. It's a very plain white background, doesn't really fit into the Android aesthetic when we look at Holo UI. And for as pretty as the home screen is with these kinds of like sliding panels, I just kind of wish a little bit more attention had been paid to the menu layouts here. But again, we're seeing LG start to incorporate some really cool tech. So even like say on your notifications with smart ringtone setting, it does actually get louder depending on what kind of an environment you're in. So that's a nice touch. The phone is trying to take into account where you are and what you're doing and how it's feeding you information. So you have a ringtone, we're gonna make that ringtone louder when you're in a loud environment. And I think that's a great sort of location awareness feature. But then we also have some weird things too, like slide aside. I just haven't had a use for slide aside where you can move things back and forth and you can keep sort of like a number of shortcuts based on services or pieces of information that you use. We already have sort of a running list of apps and services that we have through the standard Android launcher. This is replicating functionality that we already have, and it's kind of confusing. Like, it works differently than the rest of the Android UI does. So why we have it here, I'm not entirely sure, and I'm not really entirely sure why it's better than the solution that we already have, so I just turn it off and I don't use it. Unfortunately, I am having some slight issues with my G2 where the screen sensitivity gets a little wacky sometimes. And so like I tend to leave the screen double tap just completely off because sometimes I can double tap and get it to turn on, sometimes I can't. And if it doesn't work consistently, then it's not a feature that I can really get excited about. Now, for a number of people out there, that's not gonna be a problem because this isn't a very common problem with the G2. But some of these other gestures are actually really cool. Like, I like being able to just pull the phone up to my ear. That works really well. Fading out the ringtone and silencing incoming calls by flipping the phone over. The flipping the phone over thing is something that we've been playing since the Windows Mobile days on old HTC handsets, so I love seeing it on Android phones, especially like on something like this. You just flip the phone over, mutes the ringtone, everything is great. I love having that kind of organic control in how we use our phones. And this is another one of those settings that, if you're complaining about the size of your phone screen, definitely check out some of these one-handed operation settings. I think Samsung phones have a few of these too, but you can make the dial pad left or right justified. So if you hold the phone in your right hand, you can scoot it over to the right. The LG keyboard, you can scoot it over to the right. And that really helps if you're trying to do something on the go and you want to only type out with one thumb on the screen. And so, we're talking about a phone with an almost phablet sized screen, a 5.2-inch screen. I mean, even just a year ago or 2 years ago, we would have laughed at how big of a screen this is. And yet the phone form factor is pretty close to other phones like the Galaxy S4 and the HTC One. So if you're having issues and you're trying to get into this, well, it's hard to use one-handed and my thumb doesn't go from here to here like on an iPhone. Well, we're trying to deliver software solutions which can help you out with that. So I would definitely recommend checking out those settings too. And as a brief wrap up, I've already posted a video online showing video quality off of the camera here, and it's good, but it's not great. The hardware is fantastic, and I love having another Android competitor with an optical image stabilized lens built into it. It definitely helps with handshaking, low light capabilities, but the app that they use for the camera kind of holds that hardware back a little bit. And I don't want to spend a lot of time harping on the camera. If you're curious about camera performance, definitely check out my my camera review. It's like an 8-minute video talking about the various camera features. But there are this sort of autofocus thing it works well in photos, but when we switch over to video, there's no way to pre-focus. And so you can't set up your shot beforehand. You have to start shooting first, and then you can select focus after. And it just feels it's not how we expect a camera to work, especially when this works really well when you're using the stills camera. See, I can pre-focus there. Why can't I do that in video? And that's just kind of frustrating. Well, first of all, I do have to praise LG for cleaning up the look of their camera app. On the LG Optimus G Pro, all of this is blocked off with these really gingerbread-like white borders. And you can check out my Optimus G Pro first impressions. I really did not like the look of the camera app on the OG Pro. I think this looks a lot cleaner on the G2. And while this layout serves us and it's better than I've seen in LGs in the past, I still do wish that we had more control. I mean, especially after you use a Nokia camera, you get kind of spoiled by all of the various settings that you can tweak and control. And here, now like when we're in video, it radically reduces what we can do to sort of change or adjust the quality of the video that we're shooting. I'm not saying everyone's going to use that. Most people are going to fire up the camera app just like it is in the stock settings and push the record button and hope for good video. But for those of us that do like to get in and manage various settings and features, it would be nice if we had that capability. For stills and video, I find this thing has a really nasty tendency of overexposing your shot. And while I praised that hardcore Qualcomm 800 series processor before, I don't feel that LG is actually doing enough to take advantage of it. So when you load up, high definition gaming, you've got almost console quality gaming that you can play off of that Qualcomm 800 with particle effects and beautiful lighting transitions and bloom, and it's a really wonderful experience. But LG really hasn't done anything with that processing power to put this above, say, something like the Galaxy Note 3. For example, in the Galaxy Note 3, you can record video in 4K quality. There is a setting on the G2 to record 60 frames per second 1080p video, but I kind of wish that LG themselves had done more to tap into the raw processing power of this handset. While using it throughout the day, it was hard to see an appreciable difference in performance between the G2 using LG services and apps compared to, say, the OG Pro, which has a much less powerful processor. And so it's time to wrap up how I feel about the LG G2. I have to be a little measured in how I sum up my thoughts because this isn't my favorite phone of the year. But that shouldn't detract from the excitement I feel when I see another company entering the United States market looking to compete, because competition is good. And LG is showing that they can bring some really exciting features to the mobile handset market. And they're also starting to stray from some of the Samsung homage that I've seen on some of their previous devices. There is a unique feel to the G2, which I haven't experienced in the short time I've held other LG devices, and when I was reviewing the OG Pro, which feels a little kinda Galaxy Note-ish. The G2 walks away from that wonderfully, where I don't feel like I'm just picking up another Galaxy S4 clone. Combine that with the fact that we've got killer internal hardware, even though it's up to the user of the phone to make use of all of that hardware, and insane battery life. And there's not only a market for the G2, but I absolutely understand why we're starting to see the beginnings of an LG fan base here in the United States. LG is absolutely learning from their partnership with Google on building Nexus devices. And they're starting to get really good at crafting a unique experience. They've now gotten to the point where I would highly recommend picking one up and playing with it before you make a purchasing decision on something like a Galaxy or an HTC One. And for some of you folks out there shopping slightly larger screened experiences, this could potentially unseat the need for carrying around a phablet too. So folks, those are my thoughts. If you think I'm way off base, leave me a comment below. You all love to tell me how wrong I am. Back it up with some other videos. Link to this video, share it. Let's get into a conversation. I'm down for a debate because the G2 is very good. Like I said, it wasn't my favorite phone of the year. Don't forget to check out, I've already got a camera sample video up so you can see video off of the G2, and I already have the speaker test up so you can hear what the G2 is going to sound like when you compare it to other phones like the HTC One, the Galaxy S4, the Lumia 1020. As always, folks, thanks for watching, thanks for sharing, and I will catch you all on the next review.